Looking for something great to read? Well, my best books of 2023 so far might include some great choices for you. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison. Welcome to my channel. If you love talking about great books, you are in the right place. So every year, I like to compile my best books of the year, and I do this twice during the year. I do this in June, about halfway through the year, and then again at the end of the year. It's always interesting to see how my perspectives on some of these books might have changed through the year. Some of the books that I read at the start of the year that maybe didn't make my best books halfway through will make my overall list at the end of the year after I have some perspective and I find myself reflecting on the books. So it's always really interesting to see what stays, what goes. But to start, I have a short list of books from the first half of 2023 to share with you today. Now, I have read some backlist books, but for these best of the year lists, I include only books that were published in that year. And this year so far, I found that all but one of my best of the year books so far are written by women, which is not really surprising. I do tend to gravitate to books written by women, but it does tell me to pay a little bit of attention through the rest of the year and maybe expand on the type of books and the authors that I'm reading. Now, as far as common themes, I'm seeing is that I'm gravitating to books that talk about the roles of women in society, the pressures that we face, particularly to be caretakers, how that affects us, and how we manage those expectations in our families and communities and our friendships. Just some observations looking at my list. Now, let's get into the actual books that are my best of the year so far. Now, the first book on my list is No Two Persons by Erica Bauermeister. So in this book, a young debut author has written her first book, and it's caused kind of a minor stir in the literary world. Now, this is kind of the story of the life of that book, from the author's journey in writing it through 9 different readers who have their lives affected by the book in different ways. This is my absolute favorite book of the year so far. For me, it's been kind of resonant and timely as I've been reflecting on the power of books and their role in the world and how they affect different readers and authors and the world at large. I found these stories to be just really beautiful literary fiction, and I'm almost certain that this is going to be my top book of the year. My next book is I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. If No Two Persons is my top book of the year, this one is a very close second. Rebecca Makkai is one of my favorite authors. This is a literary mystery, and it's about a podcaster named Bodhi who's returning to the boarding school where she went to high school, and she's teaching a course there. And when she's there, she's kind of drawn back into the mystery of the murder of her former roommate, a girl who was murdered in her senior year of high school. A Black athletic trainer on campus was convicted, but Bodhi suspects that the perpetrator may have actually been someone else. So her students start diving into this mystery, and she gets drawn back in as well. And this is just a really fantastic examination of misogyny and memory and race. And she brings them all together in this really complex narrative. And she juxtaposes past and present in much the same way that she did in The Great Believers to make really sharp points. Now, I love this complex style that Makkai brings to her novels. I think some people sometimes feel like they meander a bit, but I feel like she always brings it back in a really brilliant way that just really hits to the heart of what she's trying to say. So that again is I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. My next book is Chain Gang AllStars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. Now, this is a dystopian satire about a near-future U.S. that has created this gladiator sport network out of its prison system. Now, the prisoners who participate, they fight to the death in these broadcasted events. Those who survive 3 years in the games can then be freed from the entire prison system. This book follows 2 women who are kind of stars in the Chain Gang AllStars sport network because they have survived all of their events. One of them is close to her release date, and we get a look at the ways that she and other prisoners are trying to preserve their humanity when the system is designed to strip it away from them. And we also get perspectives from other prisoners, guards, fans, protesters, and we start to understand that the ways that the phenomenon permeates and affects the society who has made a sport out of killing. This is just a brutal and thought-provoking book, and it's really good if you were a fan of The Hunger Games. And my next 2 books are actually somewhat similar. They're both about 2 young women in London who have kind of internalized this idea that it's their job to be caretakers of everyone else. And this is to the detriment of their own wellness and mental health. The first one is Mame by Jessica George. This is about a woman named Maddie who is caring for her father who has Parkinson's. Her mother spends most of the year in Ghana, and her brother is around, but he's no help. When her mother decides to return from Ghana, this is her first opportunity to strike out on her own and to try to claim some independence. But then when a tragedy happens, she has to contend with her grief while still pushing back against the expectations that her family has for her to take care of everyone. Maddie can be very naive, which can be frustrating as a reader, but it's also frustrating to read about the expectations that her family puts on her to be this endless caretaker at her own expense. So throughout this book, I really rooted for her. I wanted her to assert her independence, and I wanted her to feel good about it. So that, again, is Mame by Jessica George. So Adelaide by Genevieve Wheeler is very similar in tone to Mame, but this time Adelaide is a young woman who is sacrificing herself for the needs of a man that she's dating. Now, this man, Rory, is ambivalent and kind of manipulative, and he kind of strings her along, and the more he pushes her away, the harder she holds on. But when he experiences a tragedy, he takes advantage of her devotion and just starts to demand more and more from her until she kind of starts breaking down. Now, Adelaide is also sweet, but also frustrating like Mame was. And in both of these books, I appreciated the nuance that this particular time of life is treated, especially as women start to grapple with the societal expectations that are placed on them to take care of everyone, to mash down their own needs, and how they come to an understanding of the harm that this can cause. And honestly, I hope that more young women start to understand this earlier in life as these two characters do. So that, again, is Adelaide by Genevieve Wheeler. The next book is You Could Make This Place Beautiful by Maggie Smith. Now, this is the only nonfiction book on my list so far, but it has similar themes as Mame and Adelaide, this time written by an older woman who has gone through a divorce. Maggie Smith is a poet who wrote the poem Good Bones, which went viral a few years back. And the success of that poem caused some tension in her marriage. Her marriage ultimately ended in divorce when her husband cheated. And this book is just a deeply personal reflection of that very painful time in her life. Now, she leaves a lot of details out more for the sake of her children, but the pain that she discusses is just so resonant, and it cuts to the heart of how painful such a split can be, as well as how infuriating it can be to have her accomplishments and her career diminished, and the expectation that she just put aside all of her own needs and ambitions to take on this default parenting role without support from anyone else. So I've said multiple times about this book that I feel like Maggie Smith just managed to kind of rip open the hearts and read the words written on the hearts of so many women and just express those frustrations in this beautiful, beautiful prose. I wanted to write down so much of what she said. I listened to this on audio. I do recommend it on audio. She's a beautiful narrator. And that, again, is You Could Make This Place Beautiful by Maggie Smith. My last book so far this year is Happy Place by Emily Henry. Now, I love Emily Henry's books. I know a lot of people don't always like her banter, but this one feels just a little bit darker, a little bit more melancholy. It's about a couple named Harriet and Wynne who have always been this kind of ideal couple. And what their friends don't know when they show up to a yearly vacation that they all take together is that they've broken up. The vacation home where they go is owned by the parents of one of the friends, and they find out that the home is going to be put up for sale. So this is the last year that all the friends will be together at this house. So they feel like they can't necessarily share their breakup, but Harriet is still heartbroken about this, and they find that they still, of course, have some chemistry. So Emily Henry goes big on all the tropes. It's the second chance romance, it's the fake relationships, it's the one bed, all of the things. But through it all, she creates some really great characters who have some great connections. And it's not just the romance here that's great. What I really loved was the kind of lifelong friendships that these characters have with one another and the ways that they try to support and stay connected even as their lives are changing. So if you love a little romance and also love stories about great friendships, that again is Happy Place by Emily Henry. So those are my favorite books so far this year. I know and I hope that there will be many more wonderful books to come this year, but I would love to know what you're loving so far halfway through 2023. Are any of these your favorites, or did you like or not like any of them? Please share what's been working for you in the comments. Thanks for watching.